Good morning, everyone, and welcome to this week's Take 30 with a Data Advisor. Today, we're going to be talking about AscentData, our way of making your move to cloud analytics easy. My name is Jeff Spear, and I'm going to be presenting with an engagement lead on my team, Nira Valia, who will also be talking about AscentData later on. We're going to talk through sort of the problem statement and what we're trying to do with AscentData, and that involves the modern analytics framework that you may have heard about in the past, and then go into details on the approach and architecture. And as always, we have time for Q&A, so if you have any questions, please put them in the question box. So AscentData is part of our Ascent solution suite. This is the third of three Take 30 talking about this suite. So we've got Ascent IQ, which really helps you understand and get your hands around your legacy BI, migrating it to the cloud, just getting an overall assessment, or just basically anything where you want to get a handle on what BI content you have now and decide what you want to do with it. Ascent IQ is there. Ascent AI, basically helping you deploy and productionalize AI and machine learning. So very rapidly understand where AI can help you and then figure out how to deploy it. And then if you want, we can sort of manage the whole thing, or you can incorporate it into your existing processes and systems. And then AscentData, which is all about visualization of data in the cloud, using third-party data enhancements, using cloud ETL tools like Glue and Matillion, and helping you get to a cloud data warehouse and other types of cloud data zones. Here at Ironside, we want to help you use your data to make better decisions about your business. We have a variety of ways to do that, starting with strategic advisory, where we can just make sure you're pointed in the right direction. Design, where we can design a variety of things for you, including experience design, making good visualizations, designing solution architectures, data warehouses, data lakes, basically sort of entire analytic solutions. We also build and deploy those solutions, both on-premise and in the cloud. We also help you govern those solutions, especially with lots of different types of data and sources of data and targets for data. Making sure that you govern all that is super important, and that can include data quality and master data management, as well as governance structure and organizations, stewardship, and governance at the day-to-day level. And then lastly, we can help you manage all of that, whether it's managing entire servers or particular tools, connecting to your on-premise systems and making sure that you're running right. We can do any or all of that to help you keep your systems running. So as those of you who attend a lot of these Take 30s probably know, I love to talk about the modern analytics framework. So I'm going to talk about it here a little bit because it really points to why we have AscentData as an offering. Really, our point of view here led to AscentData sort of coming into existence. So the modern analytics framework is really designed to sort of divide up two separate activities. And so one of those is rapid insight generation. So you have analysts and data scientists and engineers doing things to create value out of your data. And what we want to do is make sure that they're focused on that and not focused on manually refreshing spreadsheets or doing things that are sort of not as valuable, especially given the skill sets that they have. And so what you want is you want to have separate teams, IT, data engineers, automating the value delivery and sort of finding, okay, here's something that's valuable, let's get it out to as many people as possible in an efficient manner as possible. And the way we want you to do that is through data as a service. And our point of view on data as a service is that you've got a variety of ways and levels of data refinement that you want to have in your framework, in your organization. So at one end, you have data warehouses, which are still very popular, but data warehouses are very heavyweight. It's very easy to get data out of them, but it takes a lot of work to refine the data to get data into them. And that often leads to lags and delays in updating the warehouse just because it takes so much work. And at the other end, you've got data lakes, which are very easy to get data into, but harder to do analysis on because the data is in a raw format. And then in the middle, you've got data zones and sandboxes, which represent a balance of those two things. And so you want to refine the data enough to make it valuable, but not so much that the overhead to do that maintenance becomes an issue. And so enough depends on the nature of your organization, the people you have doing the work on the data, their skill sets, their preferences. So that middle ground is definitely a per organization decision as to what types of structures make the most sense. So the end result is, and this is happening now regardless, is you have a lot more types of data, levels of refinement, locations for data. There's a lot more moving parts, and the goal is to create, to make those moving parts small and efficient, so that you can manage them easily. And so we find that the cloud is really a great way to do that, because the cloud allows you to dynamically scale things up and down. You can create things that you need them. You can let them go when you're done. And so we really are, seeing a lot of people move to the cloud to solve these kinds of problems, and we're making that recommendation. So the challenge we saw with AscentData was starting that cloud journey can be challenging. If you are new to the cloud, there's a lot going on, and maybe you're not sure, which platform to choose, what tools to use. Maybe you have an existing data warehouse that's already on premise, and you want to move that to the cloud. And again, there's a lot of decisions there, and that's a great time to sort of maybe do some redesign and refactoring, and what needs to change and what should stay the same. And then also you may have, existing data assets. You may have new data sources that haven't made it into the warehouse yet. How do you incorporate those? So these were really the problems that we wanted to solve. And going one level deeper, when we approach a cloud project, we saw there's just a lot of infrastructure and foundational decisions that you have to make in order to create a cloud solution. And so the upper right of this slide is our checklist for if we're doing a BI implementation in AWS. These are all things that we're going to worry about and make sure that our sort of lockdown and decision points are made in order to deliver a solution. These things are all, outside the BI solution. It's just the infrastructure that you need in place to make sure that you have a manageable, secured, cost-effective solution. And so all of these challenges can be very overwhelming if you're new to the cloud or if you're new to analytics in the cloud. And so the goal was to create something where the solution, is something that you get, and then we can handle all this stuff that's behind the scenes and apply our experience to helping you solve those problems. And so in order to do that, we came up with AscentData. And I'm going to hand it over to Nirav to talk about the details of AscentData.
Thanks, Jeff. So Jeff touched upon AscentData in one of the earlier slides, right? So what is AscentData? So it's a set of assets, utilities, methods that we built to accelerate your journey to the cloud. It says AWS cloud at this point. It could be other clouds too. But right now we're focused on the AWS side of things. Moving on to the next slide, Jeff. So going a little deeper into AscentData, what are the design goals? So AscentData is essentially an analytic environment designed for easy migration, adoption, and sustainability, right? We leverage known technologies and design patterns to create a simple but very powerful modern analytics framework that Jeff just talked of. So what are the main goals? First is bring all the data to a single place. So example of this could be a data warehouse, a data mart, whereby we eliminate all the silos of data and make the process of getting insights easier. Next is that the data is made available in the right format for each audience. So this is basically targeted towards a consumer of the data, the way they would like to see it and use it. Spend time and effort, which is directly proportional, relevant to the value that is derived. So this is basically the ROI you get on an investment. Is it giving you enough value on the time and effort that is spent? Enables and empowers all knowledge workers. So every organization, as Jeff alluded before as well, has different personas, as we call it, whether it's data scientist, data analyst, business user, and everyone has different data needs. So this solution is not a one-size custom kind of fit all, it's more customized. So that's one of the main goals of the AscentData option we have here. The last one is separation automation, separates automation from insight generation. So this is again one of the pillars of the modern analytics framework that Jeff talked about, where a business user could focus on writing reports, whereas a data engineer would focus on automating the data movement. So these are the 5 main goals of AscentData that we focus on. And Jeff, go to the next slide, please. All right, so how is it delivered, right? So we designed it to deliver this in progressive modules. On the left side in yellow are the 4 modules. I will touch upon these in the next slide in more detail, but basically it starts at the bottom. We call it the RCA, the Rapid Cloud Assessment, and it goes up to monitoring and evaluation when you finish all the 4 modules. So every step along this way, the goal is to provide actionable insight about your data and use case. there is no long-term agreement. So in this case, we have a gated approach. So for example, when you finish the RCA, if at that point there is not enough value derived, we could move on to the next use case. We do not have to do the other modules. Pay-as-you-go pricing. So the fact that this is a cloud offering, we make use of the pay-as-you-go model, and you only pay for the resources that are used. Unlike in an on-premises solution where resources have to be provisioned before, and then you pay for that irrespective of whether it's used or not. And last but not the least is agility and scalability. So by this we mean you could add more use cases, more data sources going forward if these modules deliver the value that you expect it to. So these are the way we would deliver the AscentData solution in progressive modules. Jeff, can go to the next slide, please. So here we'll talk specifically of the module 1, which we call the RCA, the Rapid Cloud Assessment, which demonstrates the value of a cloud analytics stack. So the key here is this is a time-bound approach, right? So the time it takes to do this model is dependent on the type of use case. We anticipate this to be between 3 to 6 weeks. What are the steps that we would do, or what we would do as in this particular module? So first and foremost is identify the use case. So an example here is you may want to evaluate a cloud data warehouse for performance. I mean, there are many cloud data warehouse solutions out there, right? Whether it's Snowflake, Redshift, Synapse, you may want to evaluate one that may suit your requirements, your performance needs, for example. So we identify that first. Next, we collect the sample data. So we make this very simple. We generally recommend getting flat files. And the goal for that is this helps us decouple from your system. There is no impact on your system. We don't need access to your system. This can just work in parallel outside of your environment. We take this data and load it into the cloud storage service. This being on AWS, that's the S3 buckets. Then we ingest this data from the S3 buckets to the staging tables. Based on whether we have Snowflake, Redshift, Synapse, doesn't matter. This is the standard flow that we follow, moving the data into staging tables. And next comes the important one of designing the model. So in this case, the example I have above, it says sales by customer and product. So in this case, it basically would mean one fact table and 2 dimension tables. So we do that, and then we load the data from staging tables into the data model, and we do optimal transformations as needed for this particular process. We use an ELT approach, and the reason being this allows us to harness the power of the bulk processing power of these cloud data warehouses from a performance perspective. That's the approach we always take. And the last step is we deliver the findings via visualizations. So we have standard templates in which we would present the findings to you. And then this is where the decision point or the gate comes in, as I mentioned earlier. So if at this point we believe this has delivered the value we expect, we move on to the next module, or we could move on to the next use case. So this is what we do as part of the 3 to 6 weeks effort. Jeff, could you move to the next slide, please? So modules 2 to 4. So it's important to understand here that these are not estimated upfront. The estimate of the scope of the timeline is dependent on what the scope and the requirements is. So the module 2, we call it automation. So in module 1 that I just talked about RCA, the goal was to build and show value or derive the insights, and speed and accuracy was the goal. It was not automation at that point. So as part of this module, we automate that pipeline, design and build an end-to-end ETL and data loading framework. We take an extensible design approach to ensure that once we go into the next modules, we can expand this design to add other data sources or use cases as needed. And the last but not the least is optimize for performance and cost. So the important point here is not only performance, but also cost. It's very common to see if the solution is not architected correctly, it leads to runaway cost in the cloud, which generally is not the goal of migrating or going to the cloud from on-premises. So that's a very important point that we take care of as part of this automation piece. At this point, we could decide to move on to the next module implementation if we want to add more additional use cases or data sets. So this is again a gate here. So as part of this pipeline, as part of this module, we'll expand the pipeline to add more data sources or target use cases. We will enhance the data model and the data flow that was built as part of the automation phase. And the fact that we did an extensible design, it was minimal rework on top of this. So we add on what we already have. And again, once we will optimize the performance and cost, as these are important considerations. Moving on to the last module, which is monitoring and evolution. In this case, we will design and build dashboards for your needs. And one of the important goals of this also to do proactive performance monitoring. We would like to ensure the application of the solution scales as we add more use cases and the performance is per the benchmarks that we have. We also offer production support and maintenance of the environment as part of this module. So that's on this one, Jeff. If you go to the next one. So next we'll talk about the reference architecture. This is AWS focused. So the technology stack that we have shown here that we use is Matillion, which is a cloud ETL tool for cloud warehouses. Then Snowflake, which is a cloud native data warehouse. And we use Amazon Quick Sites for the analytics of the reporting of the visualization piece. So if I relate this in context of the module one, the steps that I mentioned before, flowing from left to right, we take the data files, flat files, we load it to the staging tables, we do the ELT into the data warehouse or the data mart. So you notice something here as a feature store. So AscentData can also help with the AI/ML use cases. So as part of any AI/ML project, the features are identified, they're built, they're designed, and they're eventually stored in a database, which is then loaded into the model, the machine learning model, which then predicts the relevant the outputs. So this use case can also help with that. The overall architecture works with any of these three use cases. In terms of, there is one thing at the bottom I want to talk about is a managed service. So as I mentioned, we can support and maintain your environment in the cloud. We offer that service. In terms of the various services at the top, most of them are used in any of the AWS solution, and it's generally a challenging architecting an AWS solution. So some of the common services that are always used are like IAM for identity and access management. You have the EC2 instances for compute. You have the VPC for the security, VPC subnets, CloudTrail, all of these, and Lambda functional processing. Now, if you had an AI/ML use case, you would end up using an AWS SageMaker service. If you have a data warehouse or data analytics focused use case, you may end up using Redshift if you choose to instead of Snowflake. So it all depends on eventual use case, but most of these services need to be designed and interconnected in the right way for performance and cost. So Jeff, if we can go to the next slide. And finally, the summary, right? So what is it? What have I been talking about AscentData so far? So cloud and data analytics using the proven technology stack. Some of the technology stack that I talked about earlier. It leverages the flexibility and scalability of the cloud. That is one of the main goals. Why not do it yourself, right? So as I mentioned before, designing and architecting a solution in the cloud is not easy, it's challenging. So a lot of customers we talk to, they say they want to get the journey started, but they don't know where or how to start. And some other reason being lack of resources or in-house expertise. So that's where we come in with AscentData, help you get a secure, which is very important, the security of the entire solution, right? And secure, performant, optimized working solution up and running quickly in the time-bound approach that I mentioned earlier. And then you can choose to manage it or let Ironside manage it. And finally, it is delivered in modules. So as I said before as well, main goal is, key is time-bound and ROI-focused approach. So this is not an never-ending solution that keeps on and on like some of the projects could. Decision gets incorporated, so you could measure your success along the way and then take an informed decision if you would like to move to the next module, or you may want to move on to the next use case. And lastly, incremental and value-based approach to getting analytics, insights from your own data, getting the insights to your different knowledge workers or personas based on their needs and not the standard approach. So with that, Jeff, I think we can move on to the next slide. Yeah, we can move on to any questions that we may have.
All right, thanks, Nirav.
Yeah, please take a moment and put any questions you have into the question box. While we're waiting for more questions, I can get this started. I was curious, is this offering limited to AWS only?
I can take that, Jeff. In a way, yes and no, I would say. So the value assessment, the module one that you talked of, it is currently focused on AWS, but we could certainly have other cloud platforms on this for the more second modules. Because for example, if you use Matillion or Snowflake, they support all the cloud platforms. It's not specifically on AWS, so it is certainly possible to do.
And this next question is sort of similar to that in that what if we need a different technology stack to be able to pull from a specific source or just because it's what we're used to?
No, that's a great question, actually. So we use multi-layer and Snowflake, like for some customers which are on the AWS ecosystem, they could very well be using Glue, for example, for the ETL, or they could be using Redshift for the data warehouse. So yes, we can do that. That may mean the RCA might extend in terms of time frame. We may have to use that piece, but it's certainly doable. We can switch these components.
Yeah, and what I would say is, the goal of the RCA is to quickly understand sort of, what a cloud data pipeline is going to look like. And if it makes sense to show that, with different technologies, then we'll absolutely do that. And like Neeraj said, we'll sort of talk about what impact that might have on the RCA. But that's an important element, especially if maybe, either you have some of these in use, maybe in other areas in your organization, or maybe there's a directive to use, some places are only going to use AWS native services. So we absolutely can work with that. As we move into the later modules, it is commonly the case to say, okay, well, what's the right technology solution, based on some of the things that we uncovered or based on other factors. And so, as needed, we'll make sure that things are deployed in the right way.
That sounds great. I do know also, we have other partnerships with folks like Precisely that have the capability to connect into the mainframe and to pull that as a source. And if that needed to be done as a special, we could also do that. What do you get as your deliverable at the end of your RCA?
That's a great question. So I did mention that we deliver the finding in the form of a visualization, right? So to be kind of clear on that is we have a standard set of templates or out of a tool visualization that we would give out at the end of module 1. So that we clearly would show what the findings were and what the value we derive from there. So is it a full-blown dashboard? No, but this is a standard set of visualization that we would deliver at the end of module 1.
Yeah, the goal of the RCA is to show, sort of what the data pipeline looks like and what the potential is. And so, because we want to get that done quickly and efficiently, we can look at the data and sort of come up with some preliminary dashboards. And then as we move into the later modules, that's when we would really sit down and say, okay, what are the right dashboards, and let's go through the detailed requirements and come up with those design elements. Once we and you have a better understanding of what the data is going to look like and what the capabilities are.
Great, thank you. Also, one of the viewers is asking, what kind of monthly AWS usage costs are we looking at?
That's a great question. I think it's a very important one as well. As I mentioned before, if the solution is not architected well, these costs can run away very quickly. And maybe it's very unexpected at the time. So architecting is very important on the solution. Coming to this question, there are a lot of factors that define the cost, right? So for example, what's the volume of the data? What's the frequency of the requests or the data refresh? Like how long is the compute running the EC2 instances? How many of the Lambda functions you're using? How long they run? What's the concurrency in terms of the processing? So all of these factors play a part as part of the overall cost. And this is one important factor we keep in mind when we build AscentData, our overall solution, that these are interconnected well, they talk well, and we highly optimize these in terms of what the cost looks like. And we do present an upfront expected cost if based on certain inputs that we get. So to make it clear for you to design as a customer how far and how much it's going to cost.
Yeah, because we found that often adjusting to that way of thinking, where when you're on premise, the costs are more fixed, right? You have servers and they're on and you've already paid for them. Whereas in the cloud, there's different cost models for different services. They're often consumption based, and what consumption means is something that you have to understand and define. And so we help you understand those drivers and what the model looks like, so that you can, estimate going forward, but also so that as you actually build things out, or we build things out for you, you can look and verify and see, how your estimates are matching up to the realities.
Thank you. And they're asking, do they have access to the solution once it's done?
I'll take that one.
Yeah, go ahead.
Yeah, so I mean, the answer is absolutely. So you know, anything that we build as part of this process is something that you know, you will have the ability to take a look at, to examine, and even to take over. So often we'll build something in an AWS instance, and then at the right time, we can just transfer that instance over to your organization so you have access to it. So you know, we're building a process, but you own the end result. And so you know, this is not a black box. This is something where we're building a pipeline that you'll have the ability to take over and expand. Maybe you want to do that right away. Maybe you have people who just sort of need to be shown the right way to do things, and then they can take it. Maybe you want us to manage it for a while, and in the future, you know, maybe strategic goals change, and you want to have ownership of it. So that's a decision that you can make at any point during the process. And we definitely want to, you know, sort of show our work and make sure that you understand what we're doing and why we're doing it.
And just to add what Jeff said, right? It's an easy step to do. It's basically we transfer over the ownership to your organization in AWS, pretty much, if I can put it in one line. So it's not a difficult thing. So a decision can be made at any point in time when you feel comfortable.
Can you comment how I could use this with my existing data warehouse?
Sure. So I think there's a couple scenarios. You know, often people have a warehouse and they want to either move it into the cloud or expand it or make changes to it. And that's something that we can, you know, sit down and have a conversation about in terms of, you know, maybe it's something where you want to create a net new warehouse in the cloud and eventually sunset your existing one. Maybe you want to move it, maybe you want to refactor it, you know, depending on sort of where it is and how it's being used, there are a few decisions that can be made. I do also want to point out that, you know, AscentData is very cloud focused, but Ironside as an organization also works with, you know, on-premise warehouses. So if you have something that's on-premise and you want to keep it there, or you're not ready to move yet, or you're not sure, we can absolutely help with that. You know, we've been working with designing, building, maintaining, troubleshooting cloud and on-premise warehouses for quite a long time now. So if you have an existing warehouse or lake and it's not doing what you want, or you have questions about expanding it, we're happy to talk to you.
Well, thanks, Jeff and Nirav. I do not see any more questions.
All right, I think we're right at the bottom of the half hour. So thanks very much, everyone. I hope you enjoyed the conversation today. And again, if you have any questions or comments or things you'd like to check out, please contact us. My email is on the screen here, and we hope to hear from you soon. Thanks very much.
Thank you.